The night I held my son in my arms, trembling as fever raged through his fragile body, I never imagined that my own heart would betray me in the days that followed. I was a wife, a mother, a woman who once believed love could withstand every storm. Yet, somewhere between the hospital hallways and the roaring engines of Formula One, I stumbled into the arms of another man, and with that single choice, I ignited a scandal that would tear through my marriage, shake the world of racing, and leave scars on my soul I may never heal from. Before I take you into my story, I want to pause and appreciate every one of you who has been following this channel faithfully. To my new viewers, thank you for giving me your time today. To my returning viewers who are yet to subscribe, I cannot wait for you to finally hit that subscribe button, because it truly serves as the fuel and energy that powers this channel and keeps these stories alive. Please do not forget to engage and share your thoughts in the comments section right after this story. Your words mean more than you can imagine. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Claire. I am a 37-year-old white American woman, a wife, and a mother. I lived what most people would call a perfect suburban life in Austin, Texas. My husband, David, worked as a race engineer for one of the biggest Formula One teams in the world. His job was glamorous, prestigious, and envied by many, but it also came at a cost. For years, I had grown accustomed to his absence, nights when he was away in Monaco, Singapore, or Abu Dhabi, whispering promises through late-night phone calls that he would return soon. I had taught myself to fill the silence in our home with the sound of my son's laughter, with the echo of television shows, and sometimes with my own tears. Our son, Ethan, was 9 years old when everything started to fall apart. He was my pride, my joy, the reason I endured David's long absences. Ethan had always been strong, energetic, and full of dreams of one day sitting in the cockpit of a race car like the ones his father engineered. But life has a cruel way of testing the heart. One rainy evening, Ethan collapsed in our living room. His small body shook violently, and I remember screaming his name as if the very sound of it would keep him tethered to life. We rushed to the hospital, and it was there I heard the words that shattered me: Ethan had a rare autoimmune condition. The doctors said it would take months, maybe years, to manage. My entire world shifted in that instant. I no longer cared about David's travel schedules or the glitz of Formula One. My only mission was to keep my son alive. David did not take the news the way I expected. He loved Ethan, yes, but he buried his fear behind work. Instead of being present, he buried himself deeper into the chaos of Formula One. He returned home only to leave again, claiming his team needed him, claiming the world of speed could not wait. Each time he walked away, I felt another piece of my heart wither. I needed him. Ethan needed him. Yet the man I married was too consumed by his own ambition to notice how our family was crumbling. Loneliness is a dangerous thing. It creeps in quietly, wrapping itself around your spirit until you are desperate for any warmth, any comfort, any attention. That was when Marcus entered my life. Marcus was a sponsor for David's team. He was older than me, in his mid-40s, but carried himself with the confidence of a man who had seen the world bow to him. His suits were expensive, his words smooth, his smile dangerously reassuring. He was the kind of man women noticed when he walked into a room, and he knew it. I first met him at a charity gala organized by the Formula One team to raise funds for children battling chronic illnesses. Ironically, Ethan was at home fighting his own battle when I stood in that glittering ballroom, pretending to be strong. David was across the room, locked in conversation with team executives, while I stood alone by the champagne table, my mind drifting back to my son. That was when Marcus approached me. "Your husband is a brilliant man," he said, his voice calm, commanding. "But tonight, I cannot help noticing how beautiful his wife looks standing all alone." Those words should not have mattered, but they did. They pierced through the loneliness I had been carrying for months, and for the first time in a long while, I felt seen. Marcus made conversation effortless, weaving stories about his travels, his wealth, his influence in Formula One. But beneath the glamour, there was something else, a danger, a pull that I could not resist. Days later, he reached out to me. He said he admired the strength I showed in supporting Ethan and that he wanted to help in any way he could. I told myself it was innocent, that he was simply a kind man offering a shoulder during a storm. But deep inside, I knew what I was playing with. One evening, when David was overseas for a race in Italy, Marcus visited me under the pretense of checking on Ethan's condition. Ethan was asleep upstairs, his small chest rising and falling with fragile breaths, while I sat downstairs with Marcus, a glass of wine in my hand. The room felt charged, as though every second was building towards something I should have run away from. He reached out and touched my hand, and I did not pull away. My heart pounded with guilt and desire. Before I could think, his lips were on mine, and I allowed it. That night, in the shadow of my son's illness and my husband's absence, I committed the first act of betrayal. In the days that followed, I hated myself for what I had done. Every time I looked at Ethan, I felt the weight of my sins pressing against my chest. Every time David called, his voice tired but excited about car performance and race strategies, I swallowed my guilt like poison. And yet, when Marcus reached out again, I did not say no. I told myself I needed him, that he was giving me the comfort my husband had denied me. But what I did not realize then was that I was stepping into a world much darker than I imagined. Marcus was not simply a wealthy sponsor. He carried secrets tied to corruption, manipulation, and the biggest cheating scandal Formula One had ever seen. And by the time I discovered the truth, it was already too late. That was how my betrayal began, with loneliness, a sick child, and the dangerous embrace of a man who would drag me into the storm of my life. When I look back now, I often wonder if I could have stopped myself. If I could have walked away from Marcus the moment his lips touched mine, perhaps everything would have been different. But life rarely gives second chances when desire blinds your judgment. What began as one stolen kiss spiraled into something much darker, something that went far beyond me, my marriage, or even my son's illness. I was about to become entangled in the biggest cheating scandal Formula One had ever seen. After that night, Marcus became like an addiction. I would wake in the morning, guilt gnawing at me, only to find myself craving the sound of his voice again by evening. His words were powerful, intoxicating. He told me that I was strong, that I deserved more than an absent husband who chose cars over his own family. He convinced me that what we shared was not betrayal but a kind of destiny, that two lonely souls had simply found each other in the storm. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to silence the voice inside me that screamed I was a mother first, a wife second, and that I had no right to give myself away to another man. But Marcus knew how to push past my resistance. His wealth, his charm, his ability to make me forget the fear of Ethan's illness even for a few minutes, it all pulled me deeper. Soon, our meetings became frequent. In secret hotel rooms after gala dinners. In his private villa when he claimed to be handling business. Even in the back corners of Formula One paddocks where the sound of roaring engines drowned out the whispers of sin. With every encounter, I dug myself deeper into a pit I would later find impossible to climb out of. It was during one of those nights in his villa that I first saw the other side of Marcus. He was on the phone, his voice low but sharp, as he paced across the room. "Do not worry about the timing chips. We control the sensors. They will not notice," he said. His tone was firm, commanding, the voice of a man orchestrating something far bigger than himself. I froze. I had no idea what he was talking about, but it sounded technical, calculated, dangerous. He noticed me watching and quickly ended the call. "That was nothing," he assured me with a smile. "Just business." But the unease in my stomach told me it was not nothing. That night, as I lay in his arms, I wondered what kind of business Marcus was truly involved in. Meanwhile, David grew more distant. His calls became shorter, his return trips home less frequent. When he was around, he seemed distracted, lost in his own world of engines, strategies, and corporate politics. I told myself it was his way of coping with Ethan's illness, but deep down, I suspected something more. Then one night, while Marcus was holding me in his suite overlooking the city lights, he whispered something that made my heart stop. "You think your husband is innocent in all this?" Claire, wake up. He is not just an engineer. He is part of it. The whole team is in it. I turned to him, shaken. Part of what? Marcus smiled, a smile that sent a shiver down my spine. The scandal. The timing manipulations. The rigged race strategies. Formula One is not just about speed, darling, it is about power. And power always has a price. The words clung to me like a curse. Was David, my husband, involved in this? Was the man I had once trusted with my life now keeping secrets that could destroy everything? I tried to ignore Marcus's words, but I could not. I began to notice things David said that did not add up. He would mention late-night meetings, hushed discussions with team executives, and then quickly change the subject. When I asked about the team's sudden and suspicious victories, he dismissed my questions with a cold laugh. The more I looked, the more cracks I saw. And the guilt of my affair became entangled with a new fear that I was sleeping with a man who knew too much, while married to a man who might already be drowning in the same corruption. One night, Marcus looked me in the eyes and said something I will never forget. You are not just my lover, Claire. You are my secret weapon. Do you know how much influence a woman like you has over a man like David? My breath caught. What do you mean? Simple, he said smoothly. You are closer to him than anyone else. You hear things. You see things. And when the time is right, I will need you to share them. It was in that moment I realized I was not just betraying my husband with another man's touch, I was being pulled into a scandal that could bring down the entire sport. At home, Ethan's condition worsened. His fevers became more frequent, his body weaker. I spent sleepless nights by his bedside, holding his tiny hands, praying to God for a miracle. And every time his eyes opened, filled with pain but still shining with innocence, I hated myself more. I was his mother, yet while he fought for his life, I was tangled in deceit, in lust, in a world of corruption that could destroy us all. David barely noticed my distraction. He was too consumed by his work, too blinded by his ambition. He did not see the guilt written all over my face. Or maybe he saw it and chose to ignore it, because his own secrets were just as damning. Weeks later, it all began to make sense. A major Formula One race ended in shocking controversy, timing errors, manipulated data, accusations flying across the paddock. Headlines screamed about the biggest scandal in Formula One history, though no proof had yet surfaced. And in the shadows of it all, Marcus held me close and whispered, "This is only the beginning. Watch closely, Claire. The house of cards is about to collapse." I realized then that I was no longer just a bystander in a story of betrayal. I was part of it. I was living inside the heart of a storm that could destroy my marriage, ruin my husband, and shatter the sport he had devoted his life to. That night, I went home to Ethan. He was asleep, his frail body curled under the blankets. I kissed his forehead and whispered an apology he could not hear. Then I walked into my bedroom where David's suitcase lay half opened, filled with team documents and race data. I stared at it, my heart torn between two worlds, between loyalty to the man I married and the dangerous temptation of the man who had already claimed me. The walls of lies were closing in, and I knew it was only a matter of time before everything exploded. That was the height of my betrayal, caught between a sick child, a distant husband, and a lover who was not only stealing my heart but also dragging me into the darkest scandal Formula One would ever know. There is a strange silence that comes before a storm, a deceptive calm that makes you believe you might be safe. But safety is an illusion when your life is built on lies, and mine was nothing but a fragile tower waiting to collapse. By the time the scandal exploded, there was no turning back. I was already too deep, too compromised, and too broken. The day it all came crashing down was one I will never forget. Ethan had been admitted to the hospital again. His fevers had returned, stronger this time, and his body was fighting harder than ever. I sat at his bedside, watching his chest rise and fall, whispering silent prayers through tears. The machines beeped steadily, a haunting reminder that my child's life was hanging by threads I could not control. David had just returned from a race in Monaco, looking exhausted, his eyes sunken, his voice sharp. He kissed Ethan's forehead, but his mind seemed elsewhere. He barely acknowledged me. We sat in silence for hours, both of us broken in our own ways, yet unable to reach each other. That night, as I left the hospital to grab some clothes from home, I received a message from Marcus. His words were cold and clear: "It is happening tonight. Watch the news." I did not know what to expect, but when I turned on the television, the world of Formula One was in chaos. Allegations of race fixing and timing manipulations had gone public. Journalists shouted over one another, exposing files, leaked emails, and insider confessions. The words "the biggest cheating scandal in Formula One history" flashed across every screen. And then I saw it, David's name mentioned in connection with the engineering team. My heart sank. My husband, the man I thought was simply obsessed with work, was now accused of being part of a conspiracy that had rocked the sport to its core. Hours later, David stormed into our home. His face was pale, his jaw clenched, his hands shaking as he threw a pile of documents onto the kitchen table. "They think I am involved, Claire," he shouted. "Me? After all the years I have given to this sport, they think I am a cheat." I stood frozen, guilt consuming me. I wanted to comfort him, but my own betrayal chained me in silence. He paced, his eyes burning with anger and despair. Then his gaze fell on me, and something shifted. His voice lowered, sharp with suspicion. "Why does Marcus keep calling you?" The air left my lungs. "David. Do not lie to me," he roared, slamming his fist on the table. "I know, Claire. I know everything. You and him." My knees buckled. Tears filled my eyes as the truth spilled out, words I could no longer hide. I confessed, about the affair, about Marcus, about the nights I gave myself away while our son lay sick in the next room. David's face twisted in anguish. His shoulders shook as if the weight of the betrayal was too heavy to bear. He turned away from me, his voice breaking. "You chose him over your family. Over Ethan. Over me." Those words pierced deeper than any blade. The days that followed were a blur of chaos. David distanced himself completely. He stayed at the hospital with Ethan but barely spoke to me. He looked at me like a stranger, a woman he once loved but no longer knew. The media tore into the scandal relentlessly. Formula One sponsors pulled out. Careers ended overnight. And at the center of it all was Marcus. The man who had seduced me, used me, and pulled me into his web. He was arrested on charges of fraud, bribery, and corruption. His face was plastered across every headline, and along with his downfall came my shame. Everyone whispered. The wives of other engineers looked at me with disdain. Friends I once trusted turned cold. Even at the hospital, I felt the weight of judgment pressing on me. I was no longer just a mother fighting for her son, I was the woman who had betrayed her husband during the darkest time of their lives. Through all of this, Ethan remained the most innocent victim. His small body fought tirelessly, yet every day I saw him grow weaker. I sat by his side, holding his hand, tears soaking the sheets as I whispered apologies he would never understand. One night, when David had stepped out to speak to a doctor, Ethan stirred in his bed and whispered to me, "Mommy, are you sad?" I choked back my tears. "No, baby. I am here. I am strong for you." But inside, I was crumbling. My son was fighting for life, and I was drowning in the guilt of betrayal. Weeks later, after the scandal had reached its peak and Marcus had been completely exposed, David made his decision. We sat in the hospital corridor, the cold fluorescent lights above us casting shadows on our broken faces. He looked at me with eyes that no longer held love. "I cannot do this anymore, Claire," he said quietly. "I cannot look at you and not see him. I cannot forgive you, not now, maybe not ever." Tears streamed down my face as I begged him to stay, to fight for us, for Ethan. But his heart was already gone. The affair, the lies, the scandal, it had all taken too much. When he stood up and walked away, a part of me walked away with him. Marcus was gone, disgraced and imprisoned. David was gone, his trust shattered beyond repair. And I was left alone, clinging to my son, who was the only piece of innocence I had left. I thought betrayal would bring me comfort in my loneliness. I thought it would fill the void David's absence created. But instead, it burned everything to ashes. Now, when I hear the roar of Formula One engines on television, I do not see glamour or speed. I see lies. I see betrayal. I see the wreckage of a family torn apart by lust and ambition. And most of all, I see the face of my son, who deserved better than the chaos his mother created. That was my story. The night my son was ill, I made choices that dragged me into the biggest cheating scandal in Formula One history. Choices that cost me my marriage, my dignity, and the trust of the only man I ever truly loved. And those choices will haunt me for the rest of my life.